Are we back? Is that what's happened? It looks like we're back. Looks like everyone's gone though. Alright. Yeah, alright, are we coming back? Okay, guys, sorry about that. I don't know what the hell happened. So what were we saying? We were saying that, everyone wants to believe in an afterlife, right? And the hard reality is that you're never going to know anything for sure unless you're dead. Those who, speak do not know, and those who know do not speak. That's actually one of the meanings of that riddle. The answer is that they're dead people. It's not just about initiates. And if you pursue any of the proofs or the evidence for reincarnation and really do it objectively, you'll find that you end up with multiple possibilities in terms of explanations. So it's, you know, there are a handful of things that very strongly suggest that reincarnation is real, but I will demonstrate in this live stream that you will never know with certainty, and I can absolutely prove that to you. So if you are clinging to comforting delusions, I wouldn't watch any more of this because I'm going to tear them to pieces. And you know, there's no arguing with any of it. It's all obvious and verifiable. And if you value intuition, more power to you. I value intuition, but the reality is that some people believe that Jesus Christ is absolutely the Savior, and there's no possibility that they're wrong. And then there are other people that believe that God's name is Allah, and they'll blow you up if you think otherwise. So belief is nothing. It means absolutely nothing to me. But there's some really interesting and compelling stuff out there. From physics, probably the most cliched bit of sort of evidence that we have is that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only transform. And so, I've seen like Morg, for example, on his Hyperion, well, that's his religion, I guess, which I find problematic, but I once saw a video where he was saying that because energy cannot be destroyed, that proves that we have consciousness after death. It does not prove that. It means that the energy that makes up whatever gives us consciousness continues, but it does not mean that we retain awareness after death. It just doesn't. And I think that, that kind of lunatic logic, if you're really serious about pursuing higher truth and higher states of consciousness, you have to be willing to apply this level of scrutiny to every idea and every thought. Otherwise, you're just really sort of playing parlor games with yourself, and that's not what this is about. For me, I'm very much coming from a scientific illuminism kind of background where our whole purpose is to try to apply the same level of scrutiny and critical thinking to the metaphysical and the spiritual that a scientist would in the laboratory, or at least as close as we can get, right? So the fact that energy cannot be destroyed but can only be transformed is compelling in terms of creating the possibility. But if you look at the phrase, it can be transformed, that implies from conscious to not conscious. So that is not evidence. That's nothing. It just means that there will always be energy in the universe. That's all it means. And then we have people that can remember things that are verifiable, right? I'm one of those people. I had an experience in 2011 where it seemed like the universe was insisting that I was the reincarnation of this specific person. Like, and we're going to talk about a protocol that you can use to kind of protect yourself against wish demons and whatnot, right? Like, if you start to think that you are the reincarnation of someone that you really truly admire, you should be very suspicious of that, because that could be ego motivating you to embrace an idea because you like it, not because it's true, right? So, you know, this is another reason, while we're on the subject, that I really discourage people from going to see past life regressionists, because not only are they fake 99% of the time, you need to do the work. You need to do the work. You need to create a dialogue with the universe. Going to someone and paying them money to tell you things that you should spend hundreds of hours, years of your life trying to learn, and cultivating the dialogue with the universe that is necessary, along with the other skill set, to determine whether or not it's actually objectively real and true. You know, that is the path to knowledge. Paying someone to tell you something is just a fail. It's a big L. Past life regression, I think it's an absolute waste of money. And not only that, but it's dangerous to people, because, you know, it can feed delusion, and usually people are willing to pay people to tell them things that they want to believe. They're not in a big hurry to tell people things. You know what I mean? Like, if you pay $200 to go to a past life regressionist, and they're like, well, in your last life you were a trash man, before that you were a janitor, before that you died as a baby, so it's irrelevant kind of, you know what I mean? Like, you just, all this banal, regular person stuff, you're gonna be like, damn, I just paid $200, you know what I mean? Like, and that's another reason I'm very suspicious of these past life regression people, is that they never tell people this kind of stuff, you know? And the reality is that chances are exponentially higher than not that you were just a regular jack off in a past life, if it's a, you know what I mean? It's very, very suspicious, this practice. But so I had an experience where, you know, the universe, through synchronicities mainly, seemed to be sort of insisting first that I take a look at this person, and then more specifically that I was the reincarnation of this person, and communicating as it does generally mostly through synchronicities. And so that really had me convinced for quite some time after a while. You know, I always maintain my skepticism and my critical thinking, but and we'll get to the story. You can also find it on my channel, but I'll tell you guys a little bit about what happened. But at the end of the day, there are alternate explanations for why it is that I knew his writings word for word before I'd ever read them, and all the other details of, you know, his life, and the fact that I had the same habits and patterns. You know, none of it is proof, and neither are like these kids that can remember their grandfather's lives in absolute detail, perfect detail. It's absolutely, definitely, certainly true beyond any question that they can remember this stuff. It's not proof, because genetic memory is a proven fact. You can remember anything that your ancestors experienced. You can literally access the memories of your grandparents, anyone that you share DNA with throughout history. You can access their memories. So being able to remember a relative's details is completely meaningless in terms of reincarnation. You know, as evidence for reincarnation, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing, because genetic memory is an absolute certainty, right? And in the overwhelming majority of cases of children being able to, you know, explain their grandparents, you know, to remember their grandparents' lives, and whatever, the majority of these cases are relatives. Children are remembering relatives' past, you know, their past life as a relative. It's nothing. And then we have a bunch of very compelling cases from villages in India and places in the Far and Near East, where in one case, this kid remembered where he was buried in his past life, which he absolutely should not have been able to know unless he was the killer, right? The dead person shouldn't have that information, only the killer should. So that's a bit wonky. But he also had like a skull deformity in the correct place that it was consistent with the story. There's a bunch of details that this guy remembered. But small village in India, everyone shares genetics. The chances that he had an ancestor in common with people that were involved in this homicide are extremely high. And nearly every case that I can find, actually every single case that I can find, where the person is able to give information that is 100% verifiable, is some tiny ass village in the middle of nowhere where everyone is related. Right? So, as I was saying, none of this stuff constitutes even really evidence for reincarnation. I'm not trying to say that it isn't real and true, but we have to look at it objectively, right? And you always, like, if you're really pursuing intelligence and real knowledge, you have to use the same skill set that you would use to analyze your, regular life, and it's the same process, the same level of scrutiny. And if you do that with reincarnation, you come up with just a bunch of explanations that are possibilities and no answers. And if you're really serious about metaphysics and spirituality, you better get used to it, because that's just how it is. You're always going to run into this sort of forked tongue of the serpent, at least dead-ending in two distinct possibilities. Another possibility that could explain why a lot of times we can remember specific details from other people's lives is the possibility of that quantum loop theory is correct, which is a theory from physics wherein, and this is interesting because I actually had visions of this before quantum loop theory ever existed, and it also is suggested in Hinduism and other Judaism, sort of. Certainly the beginning. So this idea that nothingness became conscious, and that spark of light created this repetitive reflection process of reflection and replication by reflection, I guess, that generated the universe. And then at the end of it all, it sort of collapses back into itself, and once it condenses the energy enough, there's another big bang and it expands again. And this process just happens for all of eternity. This is why the phoenix is such a powerful symbol. So when I read last year, I think, about quantum loop theory and how it's actually gaining ground as a potential reality, that was cool, because this is something that I had I had visions of it during the peak of my awakening process. I actually saw the whole thing happen. I think I've made a video somewhere about that as well. So quantum loop theory, right? It just recreates itself over and over again. So some of us may be able to remember information because we've been in this goddamn loop for all of eternity. And it's just the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So the wheel of samsara is not all of these different lives. It's literally the same life with the same things happen every single microsecond from the beginning of beginnings to the end of ends, without any variation. And if you think about it, it actually makes sense, because once it collapses, right, back to the singularity, there is no variation, right? It's the exact same set of conditions, exactly the same every time, which would be the case. I did the other day think of a way around that, and it has to do with the three veils of negative existence from the Kabbalah. That's actually what gave me the idea. And then Fernando from our YouTube community mentioned that the yogis have the same exact idea. They have like 7 layers of the universe, and the bottom 4 are destroyed, and then the 3 that vibrated the highest are retained. This is also sort of reflected in the Judeo-Christian concept of heaven, right? Like, whatever vibrates high enough, the New Agers have turned it into like those who enter into the fifth dimension. You know what I mean? This is something that's pretty ubiquitous throughout a lot of the religious systems. So that's kind of compelling, right? If you see something everywhere, all around the world in disparate systems, I've always said that that's like a reason to maybe take it seriously, maybe, right? But so the yogis also say that this information is retained in these three layers. So the Jewish conception is that you have this absolute nothingness, and then you have a nothingness that is not as absolute as the central nothingness, and so on. And there's three layers of these various veils of nothingness, and that actually is also a mathematical concept. So we have a correlation with science, which I like that when that happens, when these things dovetail. But it is a mathematical concept to have zeros of different orders of magnitude. So the concept of a nothingness that is more or less nothingness exists in actual mathematics, which, like I said, that's pretty cool. And so what I'm hoping is that because some information is retained, there's some record, right? There's some memory in the file, basically, and because of one of the fundamental rules of creation, which is that there is an exception for every rule, right? This is probably best expressed in this context by the fact that physicists have noticed that if they do an experiment 1 billion times, which is possible because in these particle acceleration chambers, they will do like, because they're working in not even nanoseconds, I mean fractions of a second down to like the trillionth of a second, right? So they can do 1 billion, of these experiments, basically create a record of the interaction of a couple of particles billions of times in half a second, right? And if they do that, they'll notice that every now and then they'll get a different result. So you might have the same result 852 billion times, and then just once it's different. And so that gives me hope that even if quantum loop theory is correct, even if this idea that we live the same life over and over and over again, we're just recycled energy over and over and over again, same set of circumstances results in the same consequences from the singularity, because of this fact of, an exception to every rule and these occasional variations at the subatomic level, there are going to be at least minute changes. So, my hope is that it's not really hope. I mean, I think that I am pretty confident that all of the laws that govern creation govern it on every level, right? So, entrainment, for example, if you have pulses, lower pulses will eventually sync up with higher pulses. This is entrainment. Electrical pulses do it, human hearts do it, clocks do it. Anything that cycles eventually will entrain. So if we experience that here on the macro level in this plane, if there are, say, a multiverse, and we are in this cycle, there's some larger cycle that is pulling the rest of it higher and higher and higher and higher. And that's why we perceive entrainment on this level, because it's a reflection of this grander level. So I think we can actually have some faith based on that observation that there's something towing the line and pulling all of these microcosms along higher and higher and higher and higher. So evolving towards perfection, basically. And if that's the case, that this one individual universe is recycling over and over and over again, but a little bit better every time, that actually gives me a little bit more faith in the idea of reincarnation. Microcosm, macrocosm. So if we're the microcosm of this larger grand process, which is a universe that's recreating itself and coming closer and closer to perfection every time, there's a good chance that we are also doing that. Okay, so that's that's kind of the metaphysical, I guess, and the physical elements of this. I think we pretty much went through the entirety of that. So that basically leaves me with my subjective experience, right? So just to kind of recap real quick, we have been able to discount people remembering past lives, information that can be verified, with genetic memory, the possibility that there is a greater consciousness that we're all able to tap into and extract information from, quantum loop theory, right? So those three are alternate explanations that, it doesn't mean that it's not reincarnation, but it does mean that none of those things are proof of reincarnation, because we have equally viable alternate theories. Do me a favor too, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. You can find all options for doing so, in the chat once I get them copied and pasted, and in the description, PayPal, Zelle, and all sorts of stuff. I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm much more tired than I would like to be diving into such an important concept, but we had to go to Tenna to go shopping today. We have to travel to the city to buy stuff. Sound is low. I wish... Hello. That's got to be better. It's turning red. Okay, so... I hope that's better. I could have been closer to the microphone. Let me know if it's distorting. It's really touchy. It's like it's too low, and then it goes too high. So there are a bunch of people jumping on now, which is almost unfortunate because we've really gone through some heavy-duty stuff in the last few minutes that really sort of sets up the rest of this. So I encourage you guys that are just jumping on to go back, and you're just going to have silence for the first 9 minutes of this, or 12 minutes or something. I'll put in the comments when the live stream actually started. So basically what we're talking about, though, is that there are alternate explanations for every bit of proof that people have come up with in terms of stuff that is offered as proof of reincarnation. And so the jury's still out, if you're going to be objective about it, the jury is still out. But I will talk a little bit about organic portals. Never heard of it, but before we move on to my own personal experiences, let me address, that does remind me of something. One of my other issues with reincarnation is that it sort of bothers me trying to figure out how it is that the energy or the consciousness finds its way from wherever the person dies to a new womb. I realize there can be infinite dimensions, and but that does bug me, because I really don't even have, I've got nothing when I try to consider that, like what happens there, because in my understanding of the universe, even though I'm fairly well convinced that it is not totally just blind, dead, random matter, gobbledygook, that has somehow ordered itself into this sublimely sophisticated, system that can sustain life and create human eyeballs with complex lens systems and shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of ridiculous to say that it's all just random. In fact, Darwin didn't even believe that. Which is something I think a lot of people miss. But everything does have some sort of mechanism by which it plays out, right? Like, telepathy is brainwaves. And long distance telepathy can be explained by not entrainment. What's the other one where things communicate instantly across vast distances? Entanglement. You know what I mean? Like, we have some sort of mechanistic explanation for all of these phenomena that are even, pretty far out and fringy. But how it is that the deceased can find its way to the proper body, and this idea that we go to some other realm and sit around with New Age housewives that are, whatever, and everyone chooses every moment that will happen in their lives. I don't buy any of that crap at all. I think that our actions are much more restricted by the laws of creation than, you know what I mean? I don't buy the woo. But that doesn't mean that I don't think reincarnation is possible, and one of the reasons is that my own experiences with being shown by the universe who I was in a past life is so difficult to come up with an alternate explanation for. And the reason for that is that it was so densely layered. It's not just that, I would read this person's books to my then girlfriend, and I would stop and start explaining to her, what, doing commentary, and then I would look back in the book, and the next paragraph would be verbatim what I had just said to her. And I think, the moment that really kicked it off, and well, let me just kind of tell the story from the beginning. I started to gradually get these hints, right? There's just this weird stuff. This person just kept protruding into my awareness, very much without my permission, because this was not someone that I liked, which is another reason that I'm sort of forced to consider the possibility. I would be much more suspicious of it if it was someone that I had admired and it was something that I wanted. But that was not the case. It was somebody that I actually found abhorrent, mostly because I didn't really know anything about him. I had only, conspiracy theory, which, as I've gotten older and learned to associate more and more thoroughly with the Christian right, less inclined to take them seriously. So, you know what I mean? I didn't really know that much about the person back when I hated him. So the universe just kept presenting me with all these the person just kept floating into my awareness. My brother, who I don't even speak to, I hadn't exchanged a word with this guy in 7 years. And right around the time I start thinking about this person a little bit, he sends me a Christmas card to my work that has the guy on the front of it. And, I was already starting to notice stuff, so that was just super weird. And then so I finally called my brother after having not spoken to him for all this time, and we're both reading a book by this guy, and we're on the same page, and it's the same book. And so that was weird. And it just progressed along those lines, but then it sort of peaked one day when my girlfriend bought me a book about this person's books. And I had this morning ritual where I would put on a smoking jacket and I would make 2 eggs, salt, coffee thick enough with sugar that you could stand a spoon in it, black, opium, and there may have been one more. Perique tobacco. Only Perique tobacco, which is a very specific type of tobacco that's been soaked in whiskey. And I opened this book that my girlfriend had bought for me. It came in the mail the day before. And it says, the beast would wake up every morning, put on his black smoking jacket, cook 2 eggs, salt, black coffee, enough sugar to stand a spoon, enough heroin to kill a horse. Now I had opium because I was growing it poppies, but heroin's, you know, related enough. And if we're evolving towards perfection, toning it down a little bit is appropriate, right? Perique tobacco and no other. And I just like slam the book shut. I'm like looking at my smoking jacket and my eggs and my coffee and my opium and my perique tobacco sitting there, and just like chills all over. Like, what the fuck is this? And that's when it really hit me. You know, I'd noticed all the synchronicities relating to Aleister Crowley, who is the person, and I hate to say it because it's such a cliche, and it's also somebody that is very vilified and a lot of people don't like very much. But, you know, and then it turned out that there was way more to it. I had been thinking along the same lines since I could remember, you know, even as a small child. It's like I was born with the skeleton of this doctrine. The first time I heard Gnostics, when my mom said it, I was like, that, I'm a Gnostic. I don't know what it is, but I'm a Gnostic. You know, things like that throughout my life. I feel like I've come across all of these sort of signposts, and I always know them when I see them. You know, way before 11/11 was a popular phenomenon. You know, that became one of them that I associated with synchronicities. By the way, if you haven't seen my Phoenix process video, go find it. Click on the 11/11 minute marker, and then go back a few minutes and put it into context. And you can accuse me of having edited deliberately, but I assure you I did not. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm really just not technologically savvy enough. Just go watch the video. But I have been accused of faking it somehow. But there's much more than that. It's not just a matter of knowing the person's works. It's not just a matter of having the same breakfast habits. I also fucked a girl in my mother's bed at exactly the same age. My absolute hatred of Christianity from the time that I was born. You know, there's just so many layers of it that it was just really hard to dismiss. Well, I am kind of agnostic. At the end of the day, I am kind of agnostic, but I think it's not that I think that you can get to the bottom of things absolutely. But I do think that some level of knowledge of the absolute is possible. So I feel like I teeter between agnostic and Gnostic. You know, I kind of am an agnostic, but maybe leaning toward Gnostic. Man, we're finally getting an audience here. I'm almost tempted to start over with this entire talk because, well, you guys that are just piling on, you have to go back and watch because there was some really, really good stuff a few minutes back. Alright, so where was I at with this? And there's quite a bit more to it. You know, I was walking with a friend of mine one day, and it hit me, he's Victor Newberg. And so Newberg and Crowley had gone out into the desert in Africa to do a ritual, and I remembered all of the circumstances, where it was, what the rocks looked like, the bird flying overhead, and so I started asking him questions. He had no context. He didn't know why I was asking these questions. He doesn't know anything about these people. And I was like, do you remember the Sahara in 1910 or whatever it was? And you know, what was directly ahead of us? And I was, you know what I mean? I gave like a little bit of information, location, and time period. And then I started asking him, like, was there a bird? What did it look like? You know, and then the rocks, describe them. And all of this stuff. And he actually could. So that was interesting. Not conclusive, but interesting. And so then when I went out to California, a short time after that, people started calling it out on the street, right? So Santa Cruz, and you know, people refer to this process of awakening as going down the rabbit hole, right? The similarities, it, like when I arrived in California during this period, it was like showing up at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, but 2011 style. So we walked down to the beach when we got to the West Coast, and there are these two guys sitting down there. One of them has a clock around his neck, like Flavor Flav, and he's like a wannabe rapper white guy, right? And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, Master Therion, the beast came out of the lake in '98. You're a little late." And what was amazing about this guy is that he would speak in rhymes, and it was brilliant. But when he tried to freestyle and rap, it didn't rhyme, and it was completely stupid. And I found that to be really Alice in Wonderland sort of vibe after the fact, right? Like, just trippy. But that was crazy because my original plan as a kid was to leave for California after I graduated high school, which means I would have arrived in 1998. So, you know, I walk up to the beach. I've just started dealing with this possibility that I had, you know, unearthed this reincarnation that I wanted nothing to do with at the time. Now I'm, you know, fine with it if it turns out to be true. So there was that, and then a couple days later in San Francisco, I was just minding my own business, walking down the street, and this guy walked by me, and he gave me a really weird look, and then he came back and leaned right in my ear, and he said, "Hello, son of Crowley," and I was like, "What the hell," you know? So then, definitely a few other occasions, but then when I started facilitating plant medicine, it started to really happen a lot. And actually, it's been a problem because of people's negative associations. People will perceive this and they'll maybe say it out loud, and it'll freak people out because you have a lot of like New Agers and stuff that think this is a very evil person, and you know, they don't like it. So the first time I think was actually Enrica and I, my current partner, went to drink San Pedro with this guy for the first time, and he, as the medicine started to kick, he looked at me and his eyes got big, and he said like half of the name, and I was like, "Shh," and he just fell down in the chair with his eyes wide, pouring sweat, and he's like, "Oh my God, you are an old soul and powerful," and I'm like, "Stop it," because I didn't want him to freak out Enrica and the other girl that we had brought with us. And then the next time I was holding ceremony, and this kid Marco just suddenly blurted it out in the middle of a ceremony with like, you know, 5 or 6 girls that were pretty new agey, and it freaked them all out. So that wasn't helpful. The next time that it happened, a good friend of mine had flown from Holland, and we had drank ayahuasca. It was just the two of us, and I had never mentioned this shit to him at all, and we're in the medicine and just kind of sitting there, and at one point he goes, "So you're saying you're the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley?" And I said, "No, I didn't say a fucking word like that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I mean, maybe I think that, but I you know, or I think it's a possibility, but I certainly did not say that." And he's just nodded, and he's like, "It's true, you didn't say that, but it's true. I'm definitely sitting here in the energy of whatever that was." So, you know what I mean? Like, I try to kind of ignore it, or there's certain elements of it that bother me, I guess. Who is... Oh, yeah. I know what you mean now. And also there's some very significant differences. Crowley was absolutely obsessed with sex, and I could care less about sex, to the point where it's actually problematic. Like I had a girlfriend once tell me that I hadn't touched her in 6 months. I didn't even notice. I don't know why she wouldn't have said something sooner, but I'm totally just, it's just not even a thing unless someone throws you know what I mean? Like, I have to be attacked or else I don't care, and I don't notice it even. Like, you know, it can literally be years, and unless I, you know, maybe have a few drinks and someone throws themselves at me, I just won't even think about it. So that's a very distinctive difference. Do I think these reincarnations are repetitive? Well, so far I think I've traced myself back from Aleister Crowley to Elvis Levi, Count Cagliostro, and all the way back to Pythagoras, which is awfully haughty of me. You know, I definitely am self-conscious about the status of those people. But I think that, you know, whether it's actual transmigration of the soul or just a sort of archetypal extension over time is almost irrelevant. You know, my mission since I was a child, like, I could have told you in 4th grade what my life mission was. Like, I would have explained it almost exactly. Haughty, it means like maybe egoic, I guess. Anyways, you know what I mean? Like, I've always had this same purpose, which was to find metaphysical truth, to get as deep and close to it as possible, and then disseminate that knowledge to other people in order to liberate them from cultural conditioning and the influence of religion, so that we can fully realize ourselves and create a sort of heaven on earth, and also to pursue our highest potential expression of self, right? And that's all that, you know, at the end of the day, if you take all the baggage away from Crowley and all the weird rumors and all the personal crap, that's what he was trying to tell people. And he was always telling people, do what I say, but not necessarily what I do. Like, if it was his will, people accused him of being a black magician. And he said, well, it doesn't matter, because if it's my will to be a black magician, that has nothing to do with your will. So if you're a person that is learning about Thelema, if your true will is to be whatever, you know what I mean? Like, his true will, it wasn't about emulating him. You understand what I'm saying? It's about you realizing your own highest potential individual expression, realizing and pursuing your purpose, your singular purpose on this earth, with every breath, every deed, and every thought fixated upon that singular thing. And so, you know, whether I'm literally the reincarnation of that line of people or not, I have been studying the same things, and I have the same intent. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. So, reincarnation or archetype of consciousness, it's almost irrelevant to me. And as far as these reincarnations being repetitive, I think that was sort of a response to that question. But I don't know if you tuned in after we were talking about the quantum loop theory. I think it is more likely that we are trapped, sort of, in a loop, and we are actually the same person over and over and over. So the universe will collapse back into singularity, and then almost exactly it will do the same thing it did the first time again. Maybe exactly. You know, and I think if we just use physics as a model, what it suggests is that the universe will actually, you know, 99.9999999999999 on and on with nines % of the time, the universe will recycle itself exactly as it did the last time, and it will be like every 500 billion times there will be a slight variation that will allow things to change a little bit. That, you know, from all of my study of physics and metaphysics and everything, that seems like the most likely scenario. And so of all of these possibilities, that's what I lean towards the most. And so all of the information that I've had that suggests that specific person that I reincarnated as, the same information would be available to someone who had been stuck in a loop for 100 billion incarnations, potentially, I think. So that's all I have to say about that. If you guys have any questions or whatever, I'll hang on for a minute. I don't know what I'm going to do about how sloppy this live stream was in the beginning, because there's some gold here and there, man. I think what I'm actually going to do, you guys, and I need your help, I really do. If you guys appreciate this content and you want to see me survive and be able to continue to make content, I had a bunch of assholes last month, actually, and they do this. They'll sign up for my Patreon so they can get into the secret streams and watch them, and then they'll delete on the 31st so they don't actually have to pay for it. We had a bunch of those this month, so don't do that shit. If you're, you know what I mean, if you don't want to continue to pay, it's just $10. Just pay that 1 month. That's just such a dick thing to do. Yeah, we had a lot of that. So, by the way, once again, you guys, we are demonetized. So if you want to support this content, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon or one of the Zelle, PayPal, or Cash App, or you can send us some Bitcoin or whatever. We really do appreciate it, because I put a lot of time into this. There's a mystery school reaction video. I'm reacting to Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series, and man, did I not like it. It was infuriating to listen to him go on with this tone of self-righteous indignation, and yeah, I mean, you know how he'll even talk like a Christian preacher, the way that they speak, and he's basically demonizing techniques of ecstasy and drumming and psychedelics and all of these things that the mystery schools used to decondition people from culture and religion, and claiming that that it actually is. I mean, he literally says at one point that the mysteries are the same as socialism and communism. That is the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever heard in my life. But so I'm reacting to hours and hours and hours of Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series, and I'm posting them. Editing has taken forever. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. It's going to be done. I know I said it was going to be done this week, but man, it just it took a lot longer than I was expecting. Any more questions or anything you guys want to, I get questions about this all the time, and then I do this live stream and nobody asks anything, really. Come on, you guys, where all these questions are always I see them in the comments, my unanswered comments I don't have time for. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I didn't say, but I feel like we covered everything. Genetic memory explains a lot of it. Oh, I didn't talk about ayahuasca and psychedelics and why it is that we should maybe consider those hallucinations, which I don't think is the right word, the visions that come from psychedelics and ayahuasca, as potentially legitimately revelatory of past lives. The idea that they are filters between us and all of the rest of the information in the universe, the excess information in the universe, I think is almost 100% the explanation for what psychedelics are and what they do. It's almost certain in my mind. And I can also say, speaking of, I see this question about, are you a machine elf in someone's DMT experience? So funny that you say that, Rob, because literally on the way up the stairs, I was thinking about saying, no, actually it was while I was shaving, but I'll get to that next. Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you asked that, because that was literally one of the things I forgot to mention in this live stream. It'll be a good way to go out, though. What was I saying? Okay, so yeah, I mean, a lot of people have this experience when they drink ayahuasca of like going back to the womb, returning to the womb, and then sometimes you go to the womb and then you go even further. one thing that I didn't talk about in this stream is also the possibility of parallel lives. And ayahuasca actually told me that I am currently living a parallel life, and that my other form is this like horned, semi-solid, gaseous invertebrate on a gas giant between Sirius A and Sirius B that didn't become a red dwarf because of the gravitational influence of the other two planets, which I would not know and turned out to be true, right? I'm not an astrophysicist. I wouldn't know that. So that was crazy to realize when I looked it up and discovered, like, holy shit, that's actually what astrophysicists think is going on there. Like, I wouldn't know that. You know what I mean? Again, I could have pulled the information from the collective mind, so it's not proof that ayahuasca was telling the truth. Still, it's interesting. Yeah, so parallel lives, another interesting possibility. But yeah, so psychedelics, I think, you know, the experiences that we have with psychedelics should actually be taken seriously in terms of, you know, being a possible method for discovering our past lives. Are you a machine elf in someone else's DMT experience? That is what I was thinking before I popped on. And what I was going to say about that is that, you know, you might think you know stuff, but the reality is any minute now you might come down from whatever weird ass DMT like drug it was you smoked. Like, you know, when DMT elves smoke DMT, they see Joe Rogan. Like, it's reverse, right? Like, so, you know what I mean? Like, you could just be some alien that just smoked something, and then it's going to wear off, and you're going to be like, whoa, damn, man. And, you know, I mean, people have had that experience, including myself, where you live billions and billions of years in a DMT experience, and it was actually only a minute. You know what I mean? So the reality is that we, if you really want to stay in a state of intelligence and learning and receptivity to the universe and experience, you are almost obligated to commit to maybe logic, which is where you never, ever, ever settle on a definitive answer for anything ever. And, you know, somebody said, you know, you're more agnostic than Gnostic because of that. I definitely am of the opinion that we can access information to through non-ordinary sensory faculties, much more so than any agnostic that I've ever met. But yeah, you know, another way to say syncretized is hybridized, and that's it's going to be true if we say that no one has gotten the whole picture entirely, that neither Gnostics nor agnostics are correct entirely, and so even with those two, we're going to have to, you know, use the alchemical process to combine two things. And when you combine two things in alchemy, the third thing that emerges is of a higher nature. So solvet coagula, you know, you take these two antinomies and they interact and they produce that third thing. This is where the universe comes from. This is how it's generated. This is how our experience is facilitated. This is, you know, we exist in a medium between absolute cold and absolute warmth. Right? So it's these two extreme opposites interacting that gives rise to a third thing of a higher nature. You know, in this case, it's consciousness and life. So I hope that this stream has been informative and valuable to everyone. I deeply appreciate every minute that all of you spend with me. There's so many options on the internet. And I think the next time I'll be back is Saturday. I'm going to try one more time to do a music stream. I was convinced that I had it set up well last time, and then when I went back and played back, we had a lot of distortion. So I'm going to do a lot more testing this time, get everything set up really well. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon and all of the other possible ways that you can support us in the... Oh, and also, we're still having our Hermetic Magic and Ayahuasca, San Pedro, Changa, and Jungle Expedition. There's so much to do here until the end of October. So if you've been considering coming to a retreat and you have not paid your deposit, we only have like 2 or 3 rooms left in October, and of course September is already upon us. So if you're trying to come to a retreat, you better hurry up and sign up, because we're running out of room and it's over in October. I'm done for a while. So I appreciate all you guys so much, and I am going to check out, and I'll be back again in a few days, unless you have questions in the next like minute or so. I have a pretty bad lag, so I have to give it a minute before I can see whether anyone responds. Man, the jungle is a ridiculous place to be. I've been thinking a little bit today about how much it's changed me. There's a tarantula that lives in the living room down there, and there was a time when I wouldn't have been able to handle that, you know. Now I pick them up and they run all over me. I threw it at my son, this huge female, the other day, because they don't, you know, they're sweet almost. They're soft like mice. They really won't bite unless, I mean, they can, you know. But now we have a 6-legged tarantula downstairs that lost a couple of legs somehow, and it's dragging itself around collecting all this lint, and so every night I have to kind of hold it down and pull all the lint off of its legs that's picked up from crawling under the furniture and stuff. There was some kind of metallic, like purple fucking mantis downstairs earlier. What makes someone a Gnostic? Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, actually. The idea of Gnosticism is that you don't need a church, you don't need an intermediary, and you don't need a book. That your divine revelations and your knowledge, your metaphysical knowledge, comes directly from experience, and not from any doctrine or person or church. And so that was a huge threat to the Catholics and the Christian Church, and it's been demonized. You know, the Templars were accused of worshiping Baphomet or some such idol that didn't exist when the Templars did their crusades, because Eliphas Levi actually conceptualized Baphomet way later than the Templars. And so I think a lot of people associate Gnosticism with Christianity, but I think that was just sort of a protective measure, because it was bad enough that they were heretical, but to be heretical and autonomous and not Christian would have been a huge... It's just they were already getting burned alive. Also, there are certain sects of Gnostics that people say are Luciferian, which is a bit ridiculous, because in the Hebrew Old Testament, Lucifer does not exist. Lucifer was not a mistranslation. It was just the political opponent of the guy that wrote the book of, is it Exodus or Ezekiel? The guy that wrote Ezekiel had a political opponent at the time named Saint Lucifer. So he replaced Ben Hillel, Howl, son of morning in Hebrew, with Lucifer. It's got nothing to do with morning star, nothing to do with anything. And at no point in the book of Genesis did anyone relate that snake to Lucifer. That's just some shit the church made up later to demonize consciousness itself. And I've made videos about this that are worth going back and watching. It's called something like The Connection Between Gnosticism and Luciferianism. But basically, the early Gnostics noticed that the snake told the truth. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to know in order to put all of this into perspective. But one of those things is that for the most part in the book of Genesis, God is not called Jehovah. Jehovah is a bastardization of the Tetragrammaton, which is the 4 letters the four-letter name that the name of God is encoded with, because the Jews believed that if you actually spoke the name of God correctly, it would destroy the universe, because it's a full circle. They knew about quantum loop theory, right? That the universe constantly, and also the Hindus know with the opening of the Eye of Shiva and the closing, that it's this cycle. Just as we die and are reborn, the universe at large does it too, right? So there are indications that that was known by a lot of early people. But anyways, Jehovah is not the name that is used in Genesis, and neither is him. It's Elohim, which is a masculine form of a feminine plurality, so it kind of implies a group of men and women, but it's definitely not a male deity walking around in the garden, which is, you know, worthy of noting. But the reality is that the serpent told the truth. Jehovah came and said, if you eat of that ayahuasca right there, which actually out in that part of the world would have been Syrian rue and acacia, right? Don't mix those plants together and drink it, because then you will know as Elohim knows. And if you do, verily thou shalt die, right? And so Adam and Eve were like, oh shit, Elohim says, you know, don't eat the psychedelic plant or else we will know, God forbid. And so the serpent comes along and says, actually, if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, verily thou shalt not die, thou shalt live, and thou shalt know as Elohim knows. And so they ate of the tree, and what happened? They knew as Elohim knows. They did not die. And so who do you trust? Nature? That is you know, the snake is the symbolic of nature, maybe a vine, or this Elohim who threatens them with death, lying while he's doing it, that they must remain in ignorance, otherwise they will be killed. You think that is God? So the Gnostics said that is not God. That is the demiurgos. That thing, Elohim, thinks it's God, but it's not God. It is kind of. It's like a higher consciousness or a higher form of consciousness, but it is insane, and it just thinks it's God. But it is, but it's not the Most High God. It's like a lower level of God. But so, you know, a lot of the Gnostics, even the early ones, said, well, Lucifer was telling the truth if the snake was Lucifer. So that means that Elohim was actually the evil one, and Lucifer was actually the light bearer. But of course, they wouldn't have used the term Lucifer because it literally did not exist in the Hebrew Bible at that time. But I think fundamentally the important thing is that a Gnostic is a person that knows that the only way, it's not just that you can get divine revelation and knowledge and insight of your own accord, through your own purposes, by your own design. It's the only way to do it. Because if you just read a set of rules and then you try to conform to them because you think you have to, or you're going to fall out of favor with God, you're going to fucking fail. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how it's done. That's the reverse of how real spirituality works. The concept of religion, where you're imposing rules upon yourself and then trying to conform to them. Real spirituality comes from catalyzing internal processes that cause changes to occur that change your behavior. And then you're not trying to conform to anything. It's real, authentic, natural. You know what I mean? There's no struggle involved. You are just compelled from within to act in accordance with certain mandates that come from nowhere but your own experience and your own, you know, internal being and your own processes. Trying to conform to ancient rules of ancient date, foolish rules of ancient date designed to make us all feel great while we fold, spindle, and mutilate the unbelievers from a neighboring state, because they don't go for what's in our book, and that makes them bad. So we must rent a nice French bomb to poof them out of existence, leaving their real estate right where we need it, so we can build more temples in which to praise our God, because he can really get down to business. Yep, they don't go what's in the book, so verily we must choppeth them up and stompeth them down. With whips and chains and hand grenades. But their book says, revenge the Crusades. You know what I mean? Fuck all the books, fuck the buildings, fuck the Pope to death with a rusty fucking barbed wire wrapped 2x4. You know what I mean? We do not need them. We do not want them. They are like green eggs and ham. You know what I mean? You have to, but the thing is, here's the thing. We are not advocating, right? The Gnostics, the scientific illuminists, the Illuminati, you know, the mysteries, any of this stuff. We're not saying just listen to the voices in your head and believe them. We're not saying listen to your heart and not your mind. We're saying balance the fucking pentagram. Bring your head into balance with your heart and your head into balance with your feet and in your hands. Connect it all and give it all equal weight. So when you have these intuitions that are revelatory and bring higher understanding to you, subject them to the rigors of critical thinking, analysis, learn the physical sciences, and you know, it is through that process of continual learning about the physical world and contemplation of the metaphysical that actually yields real and meaningful spiritual and conscious development. That is the only way. That is it. That is all. Those two things combined with experience are the Trinity, the Holy Trinity of personal development, and the only formula for catalyzing consciousness. The rest of it is dildos. Alright guys, it is getting late and I have promised to spend some time with my partner. I work all the time. It's all I ever do. I work on music and I work on metaphysics and these live streams and plant medicine, all this stuff. So I need to spend some time with my family, or at least my part. Well, no, my son will be up for a while still. So anyways, good night, you guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Please support us if you can afford to. Otherwise, I will stop doing this. People really pissed me off last month by signing up for the secret streams on Patreon and then canceling the day before they have to pay. Some of them sign up, they cancel the day before they have to pay, and then they sign back up, and I don't think I even have any way to delete them. So please don't do that. We're running a tight ship here, and that makes us think we have more money than we do. So don't do that. If you're going to sign up for Patreon, you know, cancel after the first of the next month. I don't know why they don't charge people when they first commit to that month, because then they get all of the perks for that month, and then all they have to do is cancel the day before they're charged, and they don't, you know what I mean? Anyways, I shouldn't be complaining about all this stuff. Much love, guys. You know, again, I appreciate you all. I really hope that you guys take some of my advice to heart, you know, and just be as willing as possible to be as objective as possible when you're considering all of these things in spirituality and metaphysics, because you'll do yourself no service in believing things that are false. You know, this idea that everyone can believe whatever they want, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, is nice and quaint, but it's not true. When people believe things that are false, they are hurting themselves and they're hurting others. So it is worthy and important that you actually seek truth. Don't be a muddle-headed mystic. Do not be so open-minded that wind whistles through your ears, but don't be closed-minded fucking muggle either. You know what I mean? There's a balance. Find it. Until next time, good night, guys.